Hi, welcome to SLK's The Champions podcast, where we shine a spotlight on visionary leaders who champion change and transformation. Today, we have with us Michael Poulos, Executive Vice President, Strategy and Operations at McLaren's. Mike, it's an absolute privilege to have you on this podcast and welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Great. So, Mike McLaren's as a name, um, I believe that sometimes it causes a little bit of a misunderstanding of it being a model of a certain fast car. And I have to tell you, SLK sometimes had this problem early on when you would type SLK, images of a Mercedes car would
Mhm.
show up. So I feel your pain on that, but would be great if you could talk to us a little bit about, what McLaren's does and what is your mission.
Right. So we do share a name with the car company, but I would like to just make the point that we got there first. We were founded in 1932, uh, and we are actually the leading provider of insurance services for complex commercial claims around the world. We're headquartered in Atlanta, but we have 230 offices in 45 countries on 6 continents. Really gives us unrivaled global reach and depth of expertise on our team. Our history was in the loss adjusting business, the independent loss adjusters, but over time we have added a whole suite of complementary capabilities in forensic and technical services to help our clients and all parties involved in the claim get to the best outcome as quickly as possible and fair to everyone.
Amazing. So I love it that you mentioned that you got there first. So
Right.
so dibs on that. Great. So, Mike, in your role, of somebody who leads strategy and operations, you drive the importance of, embracing change, especially with the, rapid pace of technological advancements, right? So,
Mhm.
how do you ensure that an organization remains, adaptable and possibly even prepared for these changes, especially during the, very challenging initial phases of adopting
Mhm.
new technology?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I guess what I would say is with any element of strategy, I had a boss in the past who used to like to say, we can do anything we want to do, but we can't do everything we want to do. So you have to pick your shots, right? You can't jump on every new technology tool that's getting attention in any given moment. You really have to maintain a certain amount of focus, and I think another really important element with new technologies is you have to sort of account for the shape of the experience curve that you're likely to encounter. And I think it was Bill Gates um, who said when new technologies sort of come on the scene, people tend to, in the initial excitement, they tend to overestimate how much change will happen in the first sort of 2 years, but then they often underestimate how the profundity of the change that will happen over, say, 10 years. And so I think that an important aspect of this in terms of a practical application of strategies is you have to pace yourself and manage expectations for what's going to happen in that 2 year slog. Um, and you want to be positioned when to sort of catch the wave when that experience curve sort of starts to inflect up over time when the technology gets a little bit more mature and when your understanding of what it can and can't do in your organization is much more refined. So if you sort of overpromise in the early stages or launch something that's maybe too ambitious, you can waste a lot of money and you can lose credibility organizationally and within your teams, but also you can sort of undermine the reputation of the technology, and people will sort of lose interest in thinking about how it could be applied over time. Um, so I think that's just really important to take that into account when you're starting with something this. And then I think another thing about technology strategy is it has to be driven by the business. You have to take those client-facing colleagues who are with clients in the front office, who are with clients day to day, and sort of engage with them early and say and sort of help them think about how we can apply a particular technology to make what we do better, and really let them drive the strategy and build it around them.
Great. No, I think that's a great point, but especially, pushing through that initial learning curve, right? I think, it reminds me of the saying, the only way out is through it. So, and I really like that aspect of starting small with focused applications. And you've sort of emphasized on that piece, that especially to address certain specific pain points within a business group, right? So, could you perhaps share an example, from your experience where this has been proven successful? And what would you say, maybe one or two things that really sort of push that through into that area of success?
Right, sure. Well, I think one example would be actually from my immediately past role before I came to McLaren's, and I was at Marsh, and and claims was in my bailiwick there as well, and there was a lot of interest in analytics for claims and how that might drive insight for stakeholders, whether that's insureds or brokers or carriers, et cetera. And the challenge when someone says, "Oh, like we're really interested in claims analytics," is that claims is a very broad church, right? You've got, and there's really, in terms of the data elements that you might want to capture or what you might hope to learn from analyzing them, or the business outcomes you want to drive. Property claim is very, different from an aviation claim. It's very different from a D&O claim, and so even just at a very basic level, thinking about what you might want to do in those different areas is different. So again, thinking about the business line first, and not try to just have a generic strategy. So as we were sort of trying to prioritize how we get started, we went back to say, well, what does our business look like, and who are the front office leaders who can articulate a particular need. And in this particular instance, we had a really developed business in the high frequency casualty claims, both on the broking and the risk consulting side. And there were some pretty obvious opportunities for us to create new value there. The data quality in that area was good for us. We were able to sort of leverage that from the beginning. And really importantly, we had strong business leaders who wanted to take ownership of the effort. So we weren't trying to sort of force feed it to someone who might be skeptical or didn't see the value. So those elements were all important in getting that sort of initial applications built, that we knew would have resonance with our colleagues and with our clients. And then over time we would expand to do new geographies, new lines of coverage, and those use cases are all different. But
Yeah.
the learning and the credibility that's created, on that sort of a solid foundation of the initial success.
Wow, that's great. And I love that approach of starting with small business wins, right? It's like building a tech snowball. You just start with a tiny snowflake and then of success and then watch it grow. And, plus focusing on very specific pain points, especially that business is able to see the impact and must make that whole process a lot more
Mhm.
manageable, and very outcome driven, right? You spoke about involving the front office teams, right?
Mhm.
The customer facing, the business folks who are right there in the front line. So the whole aspect of the need for bringing in multidisciplinary teams, including the frontline folks, right from the early stages of a project, right? In your view, how do you ensure that the silos are not present anymore once they've all come together? Because at the end of the day, everybody is rallying towards making that large transformative program
Mhm.
really successful and ensuring that it's all working like clockwork, right? All the pieces of the puzzle are sort of fitting in beautifully, and making sure that you're kind of working towards that one single-minded vision of that program that you've outlined. So how do you ensure that these teams are working so effectively together that there is almost no room for error?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's always going to be room for error. I think but the importance of having a team that is working together is that you can course correct much more effectively, right? And so, whenever we're talking about building sort of new applications or whatever, the first instance is to get a senior leader, right? It's someone who has responsibility either for either for clients or for P&L, or ideally both, to stand up and say, this is going to be my priority, right? And articulate that to the organization and say, this is where we're going with this, because that's going to be very important to get to build initial momentum and downstream for change management, right? And then the first sort of test of that, right, is to say, will you put one of your best people on this project as a primary responsibility, right? So, you're not obviously going to get like, the head of, of a major business unit to spend 30% of his time on a technology project like this. But has to go to a strong one of his her or her strong lieutenants to make it a primary responsibility, maybe full time. Certainly one of the kind of 1 to 3 most important priorities for that individual, and that person really needs to be working with the broader team on a day-to-day basis in the design phase, articulating what it is that we need, and then as you're going through the sprints, to really say, okay, yeah, that's what I meant, or that's not what I meant, or I thought I meant that, but actually, can we change this, right? So that and what you'll do that way is you'll be much more effective in the way that your technical resources are working, and you'll get to something that is much more likely to work, and you have a very effective evangelist to go back into the business when the time comes and say to people, this is really, this is how this can create value for us or for our clients or et cetera. And then that person, there's a bridging role, right? Someone who's maybe like the product manager or whatever, but someone who can oversee the folks who are writing the stories and the technical requirements. And then, of course, you have all the tech partners on the back end. And there's a lot of disciplines there, right? So architecture is different from data, is different from UX, is different from security, right? Like, so there's a lot of people, right? And there's complexity that comes from having those teams working hand in glove together. But I think it's a false economy to say you can kind of throw a broad idea over the wall to a tech team, and then you're going to get back what you want in 3 months or 6 months or whatever. And so it's having that sort of ownership and buy-in across the organization, and having the team interact on a regular basis as a group, so that they all are coming along together. I think that's just really it's critical.
That's great because, obviously each of these groups have their own, challenges, their own pain points, their own, criteria of what success could mean for them.
Mhm.
So I think the intersection of bringing in the tech, the strategy, and the business folks
Mhm.
together to ensure that there is a certain amount of, I think, I would believe in empathy is needed to understand what is it that would make the tech team successful in that process of working towards the program versus what does it mean for business, and what are those pain points, and how do we sort of help each other in that process so that ultimately the program is going to go as flawlessly as possible, right? I think that's a great insight, Mike. Thank you for that. um, you've spent a considerable amount of your career on the consulting side.
Mhm.
So drawing from your consulting experience, you've naturally stressed the importance of treating internal stakeholders as your clients and guiding them through change with a very compelling narrative. So and I'm sure a one size fits all approach doesn't work because obviously stakeholder groups have different personas and different pain points. So what is your view on tailoring these strategies to different types of stakeholder groups within an organization?
Right. I mean, I think what it comes down to in my mind is, again, take a step back. Every business exists to serve the needs of clients. So if you're doing something in that business, you should be thinking about, how does this help us serve our clients better? How does this going to make us more sort of effective in that carrying out our mission? And I think a lot of it comes back to specificity, right? So what is it that we're going to build here? Why are we doing it? How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? And really sort of setting those expectations up front, and then go in obviously with an extremely clear timeline, with milestones, so if you're on track, or you need to make a course correction or adjust expectations. And ideally, the most as specific and quantifiable metrics to define success. And obviously the best metric is some sort of like financial metric, but some of those are more obvious than others. But there's always going to be some kind of a set of metrics that, if you say, I want to get the cost of doing X down by 20%, or we're going to capture Y amount of data, or we're going to create a tool that allows us to generate this insight for clients. Those are, or we're going to redefine this particular process, and here's the current state, here's the future state, and this is how we're going to get from point A to point B. So I think that just having that specificity, and again, picking things that you are very confident you can get to in the time frame that you define. That I think is just really the core of it.
Got it. Got it. And I think it's, fascinating that, naturally it's a bit of a mindset shift, but a very powerful, subtle mindset shift when you're looking at your own internal stakeholders as customers, and then kind of picking areas that would work for them, being specific. And ultimately, of course, I think, the idea is to ensure that they are seeing the impact that's being created, through these programs or through the process that you are guiding them through. Um, so, Mike, I want to kind of go a little bit off-road and ask you a slightly different question, and please
Mhm.
humor me on this.
Okay.
With so many new technologies emerging, sometimes, it feels like you're living in a sci-fi movie. Okay, so
Mhm.
if you could have, like, let's say, one piece of tech from any of the sci-fi films that we've obviously grown up watching to, help with change management,
Mhm.
what would it be, and why would you choose that?
Well, I guess from a tech perspective, as I mentioned in the beginning, McLaren's is a global business. We have lots of offices around the world, lots of colleagues around the world. If we're on a Teams call and there's 5 people on it, we probably have 4 different time zones. So I think if I could have one piece of technology, it would probably be the transporter from Star Trek, right? So we can sort of get people together and lower the sort of cost of gathering in person, because I do think it's when we do get together in person, you can see the power of collaboration, and Teams and Zoom are a godsend relative to where we were with the telephone, even in the immediate pre-COVID era. But it would be great to be able to get people together again. And then another one that occurs to me, although this doesn't really count as technology, but I would love to have the Jedi mind trick skill, right, and be able to sort of as you're
I love that.
as you're bringing people along in an organization and getting alignment on teams.
Yeah.
Then I think it'd be great just to be able to say to people that this is just the app you're looking for. Uh, you know, uh,
If only
so
we
that
could get that. And Mike, when you
yeah.
do manage to, get that trick, I'm going to call you in on it, and you should train me on that as well.
Okay. Well, I'd be delighted to. I'll transport myself over to India.
Wonderful. That sounds great. But, Mike, thank you so much. It was amazing chatting with you, and, just kind of bringing in a lot of perspective on, strategy implementation to change management. And there's just so much to it. And really, thank you for sharing your insights and your perspective on some of these things. It was great having you with us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks very much.